Hello, hi. I'm sorry it took me so long to read this book. I just had a lot going on, but I read it and I really want to talk about it. So today we're talking about Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. If you don't know about Throne of Glass, I would recommend you watch literally all of my other videos about it. I have like probably 10. This is the 6th book in the series. It was actually supposed to be a novella, but Sarah J. Maas cannot write a short book to save her life, so she just whipped out 600 pages about our good friend Kale. If you haven't read the rest of the series, I'm gonna recommend you stop watching because there will be spoilers. Even before I talk about the non-spoilery section of this book, so many spoilers. I don't want you to get spoiled. Don't even read the comments, just go read. I will say, before you leave, you have to read this book. This isn't just like suggested reading for Throne of Glass that you can like skip and like put off. You have to read this before the final book comes out. So if you haven't read it yet, or you haven't read the series, the final book comes out in October. You have time, get a move on. I may or may not be hosting a read along this summer. I don't know, we'll see. Anyways, real quick, let's go to the non-spoilery section about this book. If you have no idea what's going on, but you've read all the way up through Empire of Storms, this is basically the parallel timeline for Empire of Storms. They happen at the same time, but they're totally different stories because they follow totally different characters. At this point, Kale and Nesryn have gone down to the southern continent in Antica, and a lot of this book is just explaining Antica and kind of that culture, and it's really, really well done. I absolutely love Sarah's world building, so it was so great to get to see like new culture that we hadn't seen before. The other good news, this book has Irene Towers in it. This is another tidbit of information. If for some reason you haven't read The Assassin's Blade, but you've read all the other books in the TOG series, like, girl, sir, non-binary person, go read The Assassin's Blade. It's necessary reading. I know so many people who have skipped The Assassin's Blade and Tower of Dawn just because they don't like the characters or they think it's not important to the story, but they are so important. I can't stress that enough. We see Irene Towers first in The Assassin's Blade, and so it's been a long time coming, but we finally get to see what she's been up to, and she is currently a healer at the Torre Cesme. Obviously, Kale and Nesryn go down there, and they end up meeting with her, and the whole trip to go down, Kale is kind of, he's the hand of the king, and so he's campaigning for Dorian and Aelin to get more allies in the south and more armies to fight the Volg. And also he's trying to figure out if he can heal his paralysis. So he is paralyzed from basically like the waist down, I believe. He's just trying to get some healer to help him out because he really wants to walk again. My really quick non-spoilery thoughts about it, now that we know where we are. I went into this being kind of excited and kind of afraid. Excited because I had heard some really great things about it when it came out, especially from some of the disabled community. They said it was really great disabled rep, and so I was just like kind of excited. Like, I didn't think I was that excited, but going into it I really wanted to see what was gonna happen. But on the flip side of that, I also was like really dreading it because I wasn't a huge Kale fan and I really didn't care for Nesryn and there's no Aelin, and so yes, it was just kind of like going into it, I didn't know what I was gonna get, but coming out of it, I will say, if you're still on the edge about reading it and you're like, Jenna, I just like really don't like Kale, or I really don't like Nesryn, or I really just want to read about Aelin, I don't care about anybody else. Friends, you have to read this book. Now, you can skimp around on The Assassin's Blade and not necessarily read that to understand what's going on. If you don't read this book, I'm afraid for you because you're not gonna know what the hell is going on in Kingdom of Ash. She just like slipped in some major life-changing details at the end of this story, like the last 100 to 200 pages as usual. She just kind of like blew my mind a lot, and so there's so much information in here about the world that you're not gonna want to miss. Now, the beginning with Kale and Nesryn is kind of rough. It's kind of slow at first, and there's actually not a lot that happens, but if you don't get that vital information and you don't see the relationships that form, you're gonna be so confused and so mad at yourself. So I really can't tell you much more than that. I will say it kind of reminds me of Heir of Fire, and as for its placement in the series, I think my order of the series right now, at the bottom, like last place, is probably Throne of Glass, and then The Assassin's Blade, and then I think Tower of Dawn comes next, and then Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, Empire, Queen of Shadows, I think. However, I haven't read them in a while, so I will talk about this in a later video probably. It was so good, but my only issue with it is that there's such minimal plot. Like, all in all, there's really not that much that happens physically to the characters. It's a lot of figuring out things and learning about each other and having relationships build on each other. There's really, like the plot, there's almost nothing that happens. So it was kind of quiet for a book, but I like literally was in tears by the time I was finishing it. It was so beautiful and so well done. So I cannot recommend it enough. I don't care if you don't like Kale. I really don't give a shit. Like, you have to read this book if you like this series. If you haven't read this, you gotta leave, because I want to talk about it, and there's a lot of things that I want to talk about. So I don't know if you can tell, I have a lot of tabs at the top. I'm actually creating a reading guide so you can read Empire and Tower of Dawn simultaneously, because they are the same timeline, just different continents and different people. Nobody warned me about this book. It was a dark horse that didn't see it coming, and then it was upon me, and then I had the feels. I don't really know where to start. Let me just first say I'm so incredibly proud of Sarah. The growth between this book and Throne of Glass is astounding. She has learned a lot, and even though this isn't still the most diverse book I've ever seen, she has made leaps and bounds since her previous books of like trying to incorporate more diverse characters and diverse peoples, and it's just like really great to see. I'm not gonna say she's perfect at it yet, because she's really not, but I'm so proud of her, and I really, really adored this story more than I thought I was going to. Let's really quick do a rundown of Empire versus Tower of Dawn, because there's parallel timelines, but all in all, there's really not that much that matches up. There's a couple moments in Tower of Dawn where Chaol and or the other characters bring up Aelin, and they talk about her and they say, oh, Aelin did this, or Aelin's here, Aelin's doing this right now. And every time that happened, I just had flashbacks to Empire of Storms, and I was like, oh my god, everything hurts, it's fine. So the big things that happen in this timeline, the chronology of these two books, gang separates. So Aelin's crew goes north and they try to get to Terrasen, and then as we know, they kind of don't do that. And Chaol and Nesryn go south, trying to get to Antika and the Kagan. So the first big event in this story timeline is Rifthold gets taken over by the witches of Morath, and Manon and all of them. And so Chaol learns, this is like right at the beginning of Tower of Dawn, Chaol and Nesryn are back from sea. They've been gone for like 3 weeks, so they don't have any news. And the Kagan is like, oh, by the way, Rifthold is dead. Dorian is nowhere to be seen. Good luck with that. As we know, Dorian is saved by Rowan, and so the crew goes off to Skulls Bay, and I thought it was really, really hilarious and stressful that Chaol is asked, where is the queen going? And he's like, she would never go to Skulls Bay, so let's just throw that little detail out there. And then like 2 to 3 weeks later, they come back and they're like, yeah, didn't you hear Aelin's at Skulls Bay? And Chaol's like, okay then. We have the whole thing at Skulls Bay where Aelin fights off the Vogue, and Rolf is finally like, okay, I'll help you in this war. And time goes on a little bit, of course, and we know that Aelin is sailing for Eelway, and she's kind of trying to get to the marshes so she can find the lock or whatever. Meanwhile, everybody else is wondering where she's going. This even includes Alene and Lorcan a little bit. They're kind of trying to gauge where she's going, and so whispers go out that she's going to Benjali, which is kind of near Eelway. There's a huge battle near Eelway, near the Stone Marshes. Is it the Stone Marshes? Near the marshes, whatever. And finally, Aelin gets taken, and she is in a coffin with Maeve. What was so interesting is that in Tower of Dawn, Chaol has basically no connections to Aelin's crew, so he has no specific details about what's going on. So he assumes when they tell him that Aelin walked off and that they're sailing north to Terrasen, he's like, great, Aelin's fine, this is perfect, I knew she was gonna survive, we got nothing to worry about with Maeve, it's cool. He's gonna sail north and figure out it's Lysandra, and I just don't know if I'm ready for that. So that's the basic storyline, and now everybody, literally everyone except for Rowan and Aelin, are like going north. Tower of Dawn, nothing happened. I will let you know that if you are still listening to this for some reason. That was my biggest complaint, I think, throughout the whole book, was it was slightly boring at times, and there really was not a lot that happened. The action is that Chaol tries to get healed. Eventually, Nesryn is like, I'm gonna go hang out with these bird things and the prince, so bye. Irene and Chaol fall in love. Nesryn and Sartok fall in love. The spiders happen, and then they all race back because Duva is a Vogue princess, queen thing, and then Chaol and Irene get married. Otherwise, I absolutely loved almost everything about it. It was such a beautiful story. The characters, old and new, are just so touching. I loved the romance. I loved the disability representation, all that jazz. It was just like so perfect. I loved it. I was so shocked because I, for the longest time, have been anti-Kale, and now I would die for him. He's such a great dude. Let's talk about the characters, and we'll start with the new characters. This book has a lot of new characters because we get introduced to Antika and the Coggin and all his children and Irene and all the healers and the Torre Chesme. I absolutely love the new characters. I think some of them are better than others, obviously, but I adore Sartaq. He's great. Like, out of all of the Coggin's children, Sartaq is obviously the best because he's the nicest, and he ends up being heir and he falls in love with Nesrin, and it's like really cute. Even though he's technically a prince, he like doesn't act like a prince, and he is very much interested in this different kind of lifestyle where he rides these rooks. Rook? I don't know. We're gonna say rook. And so these rooks are birds. I kind of pictured like big emus, maybe like Big Bird, but something like a mix between that with like gold feathers. I don't know. They're really big. They can fly. They're really sweet and cute. And Sartaq loves his rook, Kadara. I loved him. I really liked his arc because at first you don't know if you can trust him, and as time goes on, suddenly you find yourself caring about him, and he almost dies with that spider. And I swear, when he was like, I just want to let you know I love you, and then he was ripped out of our hands, I died. I was like, this can't happen to me right now. I can't handle this. And I absolutely loved the end where he and Nesrin are hanging out at Nesrin's family house, and she's just like, okay, this is it. He's gonna break up with me because I'm not good enough for him. Cool. It's fine. I haven't even said I love you, but it's fine. And then he's like, yeah, so I told my dad that, like, I don't want to be a king. I don't want to be Coggin. And he made me heir before I walked out of the door. The interesting thing about the Coggin and the Cogginate is that the siblings basically are kind of fighting each other to get to the crown. It kind of reminded me of Stardust, if you've seen that movie or read the book. And so they're all like kind of afraid for their lives, even though they're all being civil with each other, because like once one of them gets crowned, basically they're gonna like kill all the siblings. It's great. Luckily, when Sartaq was named Coggin, I think they kind of had a truce where they were like, okay, this is fine. But it's such an interesting empire because it's different from all the other empires that we've seen, all the different kingdoms we've seen in this world. And according to Sarah J. Maas's acknowledgements, she kind of based the Coggin and the Cogginate on, I think, Genghis Khan. I haven't done a lot of research into it, obviously, but I think that's kind of loosely where she got her inspiration, so that's like pretty cool, I guess. Anyways, Sartaq is great. Love him. Would die for him. I absolutely love him and Nesrin together. Aside from Sartaq, we have all of his other siblings. We really don't get to know many of them except for Kashin and Hasar. And Hasar is really interesting because even though she's like really kind of manipulative and cruel and I don't like her very much, Sarah decided to make our princess gay, which was great. So she has a lover named Renia. It's a bummer because Hasar is so mean throughout the whole book. Like, she has her moments, obviously, but her personality is just like very hard. And so it was kind of sad to see like the first main lesbian character in these books shown off in such a harsh light. But her character kind of does this great arc, so by the end she's like, all right, Aelin reached out to me, I'm on the team, let's go fight for my siblings and my girl. Kashin was an interesting character because the whole book it's hinted at that he's in love with Irene, but Irene doesn't love him. And so Kale is so nervous the whole time because he thinks Kashin is gonna like come after him for it. However, I loved that his character didn't do that. By the end, when he talks to Irene before she leaves, he's like, listen, I miss being friends with you, and I'm sorry. I wish we could have been together, but like, clearly you don't want that. So maybe I'll see you again. It'll be great. So the rest of the children we don't really get to see much. We know that Tumalum committed suicide, but basically got murdered by her sister, who was a Vogue. And then there's also Argan, who is kind of a jerk, and I really don't like him. And then there's also Duva, who we come to find out is possessed by a Vogue princess. And we also kind of get to meet the Coggin, who is like basically the most powerful, important man on Earth. On the continent? I don't know. He's really powerful. So it was really interesting to get to see his empire and kind of how he rules and his stuff. Let's talk about the Torre Chesme. I really liked Hafiza. I loved that she became like kind of a central character. I think at first she seemed like she was going to be more distant, but she like popped up all throughout the book and she was, you know, fighting for everybody at the end, so I love her. I'm also really excited that she's coming with them to the northern continent. Like, everybody is gonna come together next book and it's gonna be great. It's just so interesting that the healers are gonna be like the real tide turners. Is that a word? The tide turners, turners of the tide in this war, and they're gonna come back and like save people. And it's just like, I thought I was excited for the next book, but like literally after this book, I was like shaking when I finished. I was like, oh my gosh, this series is so great. It's coming to an end. I don't know how I feel. Big three, the only POVs we get in this book, aside from our queen, I still don't really like Nesrin. I think Nesrin remains the weakest link in this whole story, including the other POVs that we hear from the other ones. For some reason, I just feel like we don't know a lot about her. Like, obviously we know she cares for her family, and she is captain of the guard, and like, she has a couple bits of details that we know about her, but I just still haven't felt like that character growth from her that I was looking for, and I don't know if Sarah tried to give it in this book and it just didn't come through, or she's waiting to do something really big in the next book. But I just want more from Nesrin because I know she's such a good character. And I think it was really interesting, her character, because in this book it focuses a lot on her like race and her ethnicity. And it's very vague. Like, you don't really know what kind of ethnicity we're talking about. As she's walking through Antica, she keeps talking about how she feels like she's home, and she feels like people aren't judging her based on how she looks. Whereas when she's in Rifthold, she feels like everybody is looking at her. And I thought it was a really interesting touch on race. It was very subtle, and it was kind of in the background of things. But that was like one of my favorite parts about Nesrin's character, is that she kept bringing up the race card and being like, I feel like I'm accepted here. I can walk through the streets. It's great. Let's talk about Irene. I think she's probably in my top 3 favorite female characters in this series. Wow, sorry, I just had a flash of Manon, Aelin, and Irene all being in the same room together. That would be brilliant. We come to find out she's descended from Silba, the goddess of healing. Her story is so interesting because she's so driven by Aelin speaking to her and meeting her like 2 years ago that she's like, okay, I'm gonna go heal people, I'm gonna go to the Torre de Chesme, and I'm gonna go back to my homeland eventually and fight in this war and like heal people. She has a really huge role in the next book, which is why I'm really nervous for all the people who are not reading this book, because like, you're gonna be so confused when you figure out the vulgar parasites. All the new information in this book really just like tripped me out, but I love Irene so much because she doesn't take any of Chaol's sass, and like that's part of the reason why they fall in love. But like, just like as a character, she's so great because she's so sassy, and she's like, listen, you're a stubborn ass, like get off your butt, come walk over to me. I also think one of the great parts of her character is that she doesn't shy away from illness or disability or anything like that. And that's kind of like why Chaol and Irene fall in love a little bit more, is because she does see him as a person. She understands that he has a disability, but also she sees him as a person first and foremost. When they were married, it's fine, whatever. It's amazing to me because like, I already have so many OTPs, so many relationships in this series that like I would die for. And then Sarah was like, oh, you think you know everything? Let me give you 2 more ships. Just add it on, tack it on at the end. You're gonna love them. We have come now to my dear friend, Chaol Westfall, who is a hot mess, but he was a great hot mess. Going into this book, obviously, was not a huge Chaol fan. I will tell you, if you don't know background information, I loved Chaol back in the day. He and Selena, I shipped them real hard. I was real sad during Crown of Midnight that they broke up. I kind of in the back of my mind was like, yeah, redeem Chaol for me. I like that guy. He's pretty cool. He just had some rough patches in the middle there. I think it was really brilliant that Sarah kind of made this as a parallel to Heir of Fire. The character growth and the arc in those 2 books are really, really similar in a lot of ways. Both Aelin and Chaol end up going to face their inner demons and their self-loathing and their guilt and their doubt, and they come out of it at the end being like, yeah, I'm broken, I have darkness inside me, but I'm gonna own it and I'm gonna be light, I'm gonna be great. What? And I absolutely loved that the whole point of his character was to like, it was more internal healing than it was external healing. Like obviously at the end he comes out and he still has to use his chair occasionally, which I thought was a very interesting twist. It spoke so much about healing in general, both physical and mental and emotional. I cannot speak personally on the disability rep in this book, and so I'm not even going to try to do that. So if you're looking for a good review about the disabled rep in this book, I'll leave a link or 2 down in the description. My friend Emily Hornberg, who is disabled, she's great. I talked to her a lot about this book, but she has a really great review from her perspective, and she really loved it. So my biggest fear was that she was going to heal Chaol, and that was gonna be it. Like, he wasn't gonna have to deal with this anymore. It seems a waste to have a disabled character and then be like, oh, we're going to fix you, and then that's the end of the whole story. It was really great because that's not what happened. He sacrifices himself basically for Irene, and so it's kind of like a Tangled moment where Irene's like, no, I have to heal you. I don't care if I'm gonna get hurt. Like, we can't lose you. God, I was crying so hard when all of the healers in the Tode were like lined up. Oh man, it was crazy. We eventually get to the resolution that Kale will be a little bit disabled because his body relies on Irene's healing abilities. And so most of the time he'll be fine, but like whenever Irene is drained, he'll probably have to use his chair. But my favorite part about the whole freaking thing, like the whole section, is the growth to see Kale from the beginning when he's like, I hate the sound of wheels. I hate it so much. Until we get to the end where he's like, it's okay, Irene, like this chair isn't a punishment, it's not a prison, like it's fine. Like, I've accepted that and it's cool and I can still be a guy in this chair. Like, that doesn't change anything. It was so beautiful. I've been talking a lot. I'm sorry, I have more to talk about. We have only talked about the characters. We need to talk about the plot. So like I was saying, the main point of this book wasn't necessarily the plot. There really wasn't that much that happened. We get all this new information that changes the entire next book. Like, Kale and Nesrit and Irene just saved this whole war. I just was getting so emotional at the end because they were talking about Aelin, they were talking about all these ships that they were bringing, and like, I feel way too much for this series. I don't know why, it's just ridiculous. Yeah, so we come to find out that Maeve is a Vogue queen. Our queen is chilling with Maeve, who's a Vogue queen, and she doesn't know it. Maybe Aelin knows it. I don't think she does, but what if she did? Oh my god. Deep breaths, deep breaths. I'm kind of surprised that none of us were like, yeah, of course there's gonna be like female Vogue. Especially because Sarah is such a woman-oriented person. Like, she loves men, obviously, but like her stories revolve around women. And so I shouldn't be that shocked that the main villain is actually a woman. And so we really know almost nothing about these female Vogue and what makes them different from these male kings, princes, whatever. So that's fun. Antica was kind of started by Fae, and these Fae left Doranel because Maeve is an evil queen, and they decided to create this oasis, this area of healers, because the Vogue are parasites. So it's basically like the host, obviously. And so Irene figures out that if she uses her power, she can kind of extract the Vogue, and she can save people that way, and she can destroy the Vogue as well. This new thing kind of changes the course of the next book, but it also changes it from being this story of like, I don't know, it just felt very much like Harry Potter in the sense that it was like, oh, here's the chosen one, they're gonna sacrifice themselves, blah, 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 but like, it's actually way more complex than that, especially if you think about, I just had this thought, so Aelin / Dorian is supposed to die to lock these creatures in the gates, but like, also, the Vogue are so afraid of fire and light. What if for some reason Aelin doesn't have to die because like Irene and all of her healers can like kill the Vogue somehow, like even like Maeve. Sorry, theories are happening now. It's fine. Whatever, we're gonna move past it. Kale knows who wrote Irene's note, and that whole section was literally just the cutest thing ever because Kale, it shows how far Kale has come as a character. Because instead of him being like, oh my god, this is from Aelin, oh, I can't believe it, he was like crying. He was like, Aelin brought me to my true love, I'm so happy. It was just so emotional and beautiful, and like I really loved how it ended, and I loved setting up for the next book. Like, I think the next book is going to be a lot, and I'm very afraid and terrified for it, but also really excited. Like, I think Sarah will do a great job with it. So obviously I don't really have a lot of theories right now for the next book because I just read this one in Empire recently, so I really haven't had a chance to look at these new theories. So I've decided I'm gonna reread the whole series again. So I've decided to do a little unofficial read-along with my friend Emily. You know her, she's great. She's I Like Turtles on Twitter. I don't know if it's gonna turn into like an actual thing that other people do, but we really wanna reread this whole series, and so what's gonna happen is we're gonna read 2 books a month starting in June. So we'll start with Tab and Tog, and then the next month we'll do Crown of Midnight, Airfire, etc., etc. Like I said, I'm trying to create this chronological reading guide so you can intersperse the chapters of Empire and Tower of Dawn to read them chronologically, but at the same time. My plan is to read Empire and Tower of Dawn simultaneously to kind of balance it out a little bit since I just read them, but I really am gonna focus hard on theories. I'm gonna read really deep into it and figure out what's going on. I'm gonna enjoy it. It's gonna be really great. I think what's gonna happen is I'm gonna make individual reading vlogs for each book. Maybe. I haven't done a reading vlog ever, so we'll see what happens. If you want me to do like a theories video or anything like that, please let me know in the comments. I will be reviewing the next book when it comes out. I'm hopefully gonna read it like right when it comes out. I'm super excited about it. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the down bar for some other reviews so you can read about the disability rep. But other than that, I think I've talked your ear off and it's time for me to go. So let me know your thoughts on Tower of Dawn in the comments. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Is your mind blown? Probably. I don't know. I'm gonna go take a nap because this was a lot. But I love you guys. You're super great. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!